You know, some folks ask what was one of the most prescient reasons why I chose to get involved in all of this, you know, rigmarole. And that's how I look at American politics. Yeah. Up until Donald Trump came onto the scene. The reason I chose to get involved in San Francisco, and the reason I'm choosing to vehemently oppose Donald Trump ever getting near 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue again. It's simple. It boils down to tone and tenor of a leader. I believe it's crucial and paramount and central that you have a leader who knows how to set a productive and positive tone and tenor for a nation. Not only did Donald Trump not do that, it's my fundamental belief that he's incapable of ever being able to do that. Instead, the tone and tenor we get is always of bitterness, retribution, division, and pure violence. That's the tone we've always gotten from Jump Street. Yeah. When he came down the golden escalator, he started pitting Americans versus Americans. Yeah. Our neighbors from the South, he said they're all murderers, rapists, and thieves. Yeah. Good people who work hard. Yeah. Are Americans. Yeah. You know, sometimes we forget this. I know not us, but others. We forget that it's called South America, because it's part of the Americas. Yeah. We oftentimes forget that. And the division didn't stop with just immigrants. We had bans on people simply because they came from countries that were Muslim run. Yeah, we had bans on Muslims right off the bat. Now, think back to September 11, 2001. We had a terrorist attack in our own nation. And at the time, we had a president who labeled himself a compassionate conservative. Wasn't somebody I supported. Yeah, opposed many of his policies. But think back to the tone and the tenor, because that's very important. When Americans were sad, grieving, mad, and wanting revenge, the president at that time decided that he was going to attack the folks who had attacked us. But he also decided that our Muslim Americans, who had no part whatsoever in that attack, were not to be targeted when some deeply unwell people amongst us chose that that was what they were going to do. We had a president who told us that's not the right thing to do. That we're all in this boat together as Americans. Contrast that with Donald Trump. They're both Republicans. I'm not even talking about the Democrats. I'm not talking about progressives. I'm not talking about socialists. I'm talking about tone and tenor of two contemporary Republican presidents. Yeah. You know, San Francisco, think back to where you were on January 6, 2021. Where were you? I was in a vehicle. Now I'm listening to NPR and they break in. They're like breaking news. The Capitol is under attack. I knew about the rally, the Stop the Steal rally. I knew about all of that. I knew that thousands upon thousands upon thousands of his supporters were going to show up. I knew there were going to be a bunch of speeches, people inflaming people's passions simply because they wouldn't accept the results of an election that they had lost. I knew about all of that. What I didn't know is that after all of the speeches were done, that folks would head towards the Capitol and begin to attack law enforcement and storm and breach the Capitol buildings, break out glass. Loot congressional offices, spread feces and defecate all over the walls and floors. I didn't know they were going to bring the Confederate battle flag into the Capitol Rotunda. We didn't know they were erecting nooses and gallows for the Vice President and the Speaker of the House. We didn't know about that, San Francisco. But I tell you who did know. The former president, at the time the sitting president, Donald J. Trump, he knew. Let me tell you what he did. He ordered a mob of deranged supporters who had voted for him, couldn't accept the results that he had lost the election in November of the previous year. And they decided they were going to no longer abide by the democratic norms and values of this nation any longer. They decided they wanted to wage a war against their country. Yeah. Make no mistake. January 6th was a declaration of war. Yeah. By an extreme faction of Americans against their nation. And the will of 81 million citizens, myself included, happily in that 81 million, who chose to oppose a wannabe dictator. Yeah. Yeah. That's what occurred. At first, I didn't believe the reporting. I thought, well, maybe this is sarcasm. So I scurried out the vehicle and, looked for the nearest establishment with television. I barged in. Every television I want to say there was like about 8 televisions. 3 in the front, 4 in the back, couple on the side, every television, every channel. They were saying breaking news. Our nation's Capitol building is under attack. Donald Trump supporters are attacking our Capitol. I saw thousands of Trump 2020 flags. Yeah. Thousands of men attacking, breaching their Capitol building. Nothing like that had ever happened. Yeah, nothing. Yeah. And now we've gotten to the point where, it's either condoned by the Republican Party and by Donald Trump and his most vehement supporters is justified. He's already said that he'll pardon everyone who was involved if he wins in 2024. He stated that. Now, that should tell you something right there. It really should. Because if there's no accountability for it, really, if there's no accountability for that, not only will it happen again, it'll be 100 times worse. Period. Yeah. It'll be 100 times worse. He wants immunity. Have you all heard this? San Francisco, can you believe this? The former president says that the duties and title of the office provide him complete immunity to anything that a president might do. Now, there's such a thing as high crimes and misdemeanor. I would say there's no higher crime than waging war on a nation you took an oath to defend and protect. Yeah. A lot of folks, legal scholars, have argued that he's disqualified himself to even be president under the Insurrection Act. A lot of folks have argued that. Legal scholars throughout our country. Whether that's the case or not, it's a fact that he's seeking immunity for waging a war against our nation. That's a fact. This is in front of the Supreme Court, our highest court in our nation's land. The central question before the court is this: can Donald Trump or any president, can they wage a war on their own nation? Because, if they say that he's above the law, this one individual, they say that, then what's to stop anybody else from doing it? Yeah. What's to stop folks who disagree with harsh immigration policies from gathering by the hundreds of thousands and storming the nation's Capitol building? What's to stop folks who feel their civil rights are completely and constantly violated. What's to stop those folks from gathering by the hundreds of thousands and storming and attacking our nation's capital? Yeah. The reality is there's no impediments. Because we know if you let one group, do something, everybody else is going to follow. It set a horrendous example for the entire continent. We saw in Brazil when Javier Bolsonaro, who lost his re-election campaign, wavered and stoked the flames of division in his country due to the fact that he didn't want to leave office. We saw his supporters ransack the Brazil Supreme Court, attack their own nation's legislative bodies. Yeah. Many of them said in Spanish that they were inspired by Donald Trump and what his supporters had done on January 6th. Yeah. It's a little more severe than a bad example. It's grossly more severe than that. San Francisco. Yeah. Republican presidential candidate Nikki Haley. I don't agree with all of her policies. Yeah. But I completely agree when she says that, wherever Donald Trump goes, chaos always ensues. You saw in New York earlier this year the arraignment. Yeah. And folks were fighting and tussling outside. You saw the president threaten district attorneys in Manhattan, Fulton County. And then after the president did it, his supporters decided they too could send death threats. Yeah. You saw the president attack Black Lives Matter, the movement. And then Kyle Rittenhouse hopped in a vehicle with complete strangers and decided he wanted to unalive 2 individuals in Kenosha. You saw the president not accept a free and fair election, the outcome. And then on January 6th, you saw hundreds of thousands of people not accept a free and fair election as well. Violently not accept election result outcomes. Yeah. Violence. He's promised death and destruction. He's promised us retribution. He's promised us revenge. Yeah. That's what he's promised us. More death and destruction, like in Charlottesville, where Alex Fields Jr. drove his vehicle at full speed into Black Lives Matter protesters, murdering Heather Heyer. Yeah. And we saw a president in a moment where the country was deeply divided, stoke and provoke more. Yeah. He said the neo-Nazis, the Confederates, the white supremacists, they were very fine people. He said that about them. San Francisco, never forget the folks that he said, as president, were very fine people. Never forget that. Yeah. Yeah. You know, every society has bottom feeders. We know the ocean. It has creatures that live on the very, very bottom. That's what you saw out there in Charlottesville. The bottom feeders of the American society. Yeah. We saw hatred that night. You know, we have a presidential candidate in Cornel West. I would ask everybody to go back and listen to what he told Amy Goodman of Democracy Now! Concerning that evening. What he experienced and what he witnessed. Our current president said that that particular event is what inspired him to come out of retirement and to challenge then the president, Donald Trump. Yeah. The events of Charlottesville. Long before we had Rittenhouse, San Francisco, long before we had Ahmaud Arbery, San Francisco, long before we had George Floyd, San Francisco, long before we had Breonna Taylor, long before we had Elijah McClain, long before we had election workers threatened, long before we had January 6th. We had Charlottesville and the Unite the Right in 2017. Before that, we had folks who were counter-protesting at Trump rallies being punched, kicked, attacked, just for not supporting him. It had been customary practice that someone could go to a political event and heckle if they disagreed. The worst that might have happened to you was you got escorted out of the event. His supporters decided they wanted to lay hands on people who didn't support Donald Trump. Way back in 2015-16. Yeah. And then we wonder why Hillary Clinton said that some of his supporters are deplorable. Let me ask you something. Is it deplorable to walk into the Capitol building with a Confederate flag? Yeah, sure, you have freedom of speech. But you can't willfully try to thwart the certification and the peaceful transfer of power. And, associate your freedom of speech with thwarting the government's process. No. But is it deplorable to bring the Confederate flag into our nation's Capitol building? That's a simple yes or no. I think so. Is it deplorable to run to a different city you don't live in? Lie like you're a medic and unalive two people because you disagree with the philosophical and ideological framework of people protesting for Black Lives Matter? Yeah. Yes or no? I think so. Is it deplorable for someone seeking the office of the presidency to call the American citizenry vermin? I think so. He said He wants to be their retribution. Yeah. He's gonna pardon all of them. He's gonna cut them loose. Now, I don't know about you all, but you know, if you wage a battle, a war against your own nation's capital and your country, and then you elect that person who sicked the mob onto, you know, his own nation's capital building, aren't you sending the message that, you know, you support that and it's justified? To me, that's what I feel like. You're sending the message that, yeah, they're justified. And if somebody or a group of people get sent a message that they're justified to attack the nation, well, you most certainly can best believe they're going to do it again. And the next time they do it, well, he'll be president again. And it'll be nothing the rest of us really can do about it. No, the stakes aren't just high, they're paramount. This is it. This is for all the marbles. Period. Don't let anybody can fool you. And this is it. If Trump wins, democracy ends. Period. The folks that did that, he's going to place them all back into the military. Many of them were expelled and dishonorably discharged. He's going to put them all back in there. They're going to be on your local law enforcement. Yeah, all of them. They're going to terrorize, regardless of the law, because they'll have said that, you know, we condoned it by giving him a vote. Yeah. A vote for Donald Trump next year, that choice by millions of our citizens that sadly and tragically they will make, a vote for Donald Trump is a vote for insurrection. Yeah. San Francisco, it's a vote for insurrection. Yeah, because that's exactly what that was on January 6th. You know, 2020, it was important to, you know, I look at that like triage. It was important to stop the bleeding that already had occurred. The wound was already there. It was prevalent, huge. So removing him from office was the triage. Nobody said that 3, 4, 5, 6 years was going to be enough to, you know, really deal with the trauma that Donald Trump inflicted on the psyche of this citizenry. Nobody ever said that. And you couldn't in a million years have garnered that notion if you were at all paying attention to what was occurring, starting the second he took office. You know, the second he took office, he started lying about his crowd sizes. Oh yeah, my inauguration was bigger than former President Barack Obama's. Now, people dismiss that and say, oh, that's small and petty. But no. It was how they would run things throughout the entirety of the administration. Alternate universe, alternative facts. Rittenhouse isn't a serial killer, he's a hero. January 6th, that was staged and fake. Yeah. Those were FBI informants, don't you know? Yeah. They started the psychological warfare and campaign early on with lies. I think the Washington Post determined that there were over 20,000 lies that he uttered during his 4-year nightmare tenure. It was a nightmare. From Kenosha to Portland, you name it, it was a nightmare. And 2020 was about triage, treating the sickness, the wound. Now, I don't know how we can, in my opinion, I'm just thinking for myself, I don't know how we can fire someone and then want to rehire the same person who we now know thinks he should have immunity for declaring war against the Republic. I don't know how you get there, San Francisco. I can't get there. You'd have to twist yourself in the most ginormous knots for that person. I can't get there. There's no way I would ever support someone, even remotely like Donald Trump, for any type of leadership, let alone the highest office in the land. We have a real choice to make now. Former Congresswoman Liz Cheney believes we're all sleepwalking towards authoritarianism. I kind of agree with her. If these polls are to be believed, which, I take polls with a grain of salt, especially this far out. But what we do know is this. I'm not worried about Donald Trump or his supporters. They're gone. The sickness amongst 25 to 30% of our nation, it's terminal. We're not getting them back. Anybody that decided they wanted to attack that nation's capital, that's beyond repair. I'm worried about all of us who, are growing weary. I have one new rule for 2024. My 2023 rule, it's going to carry over. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. But 2024 is going to be different. Much, 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 much different than anything I think we've ever experienced. Period. Hands down. And I kind of have a rule. It's not a hard and fast rule. It's kind of a premonition, so to speak. San Francisco, if we get complacent, if there's a strong sense of apathy, and complacency during a war, we most certainly will be defeated. And our democracy will be taken away from us. Once you lose democracy, it's no guarantee that you get it back. I never will forget there was an ad that Donald Trump did. Somebody's going to have to, find that advertisement he did. I don't know whether it was online or whether it was a paid advertisement. But it showed his body, his upper body, up into his torso, I believe. And there were years that were just scrolling by. 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022. And then the years started speeding up. And it went all the way up to 2049, 2050. And at first, you kind of think, oh, something like that is funny. Maybe to some of you. But he was telling us then what he's really always told us. He wants to be a dictator. Period. And if we vote that way, we'll get that. Everybody's going to have a choice. This is going to be a defining and lasting and crucial choice that we're all going to have to make as individual citizens in this republic. Each one of us. Do we want a dictatorship or do we want a democracy? San Francisco, you can't have both. People say that Donald Trump, because there's institution, no. He's already told you he's firing everyone. Just like he did James Comey. He's firing everyone. Doesn't matter whether it's legal or constitutional. He has control of the Supreme Court. It's a 6-3 conservative majority. Haven't you heard women don't have rights to their own bodily autonomy anymore due to his Supreme Court selections? Yeah. The Constitution means nothing to him, nor to the most ardent supporters of his. No. They want a dictatorship. Yeah. Period. And they want to be cruel and as inhumane to the vermin, people who oppose him, by the way, as they can possibly be. And now this is the choice. We're at the greatest inflection point, really, once again in our nation's history. Just like we were in 1861 through 65, we're back here again in 2024. Yeah. When I saw that individual in the Capitol with the Confederate flag, I knew we were at war, San Francisco. Now, we fired him once. So I'm of the firm belief there's enough of us to fire Trump again in 2024. I'm firmly of that belief and notion. However, complacency, thinking that, oh, we survived, 4 years of Trump, We can do it again. It'll be the same thing, maybe a little bit worse, but our institutions will hold. You know, that type of complacent thinking. Saying you're not going to vote because, you know, everything hasn't been accomplished. The economy is whiffle waffle. You know, the thing that will get you straight out of here in a war is complacency and apathy. When they put up that noose and that yellow, that was for Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. Yeah, that's who that was for. And that was for the Vice President of the United States at the time, Mike Pence. Yeah, that's who that was for. They full well knew exactly what they were doing. When they put pipe bombs at the DNC and RNC headquarters buildings, they full well knew what they were doing. You know, I think for some of us, we just can't wrap our minds around so many of our own fellow citizens not believing in the principles of democracy. If they don't have complete control, then we should no longer have free and fair election. Yeah. Millions of our citizens believe this now. Millions. If we get complacent and apathy is the prevailing order of the day, the people who will be running this country will be the Tiki Torch Boys, the January 6th insurrectionists, and the Cal Rittenhouses of the world. That's the choice. Do we want the Tiki Torch Boys, the Jews shall not replace us in blood and soil? Do we want January 6th insurrectionists and Cal Rittenhouse running this country? Because a vote for Trump is surely a vote for those people. He's just the president. He's going to need his most loyalist, his cruelest, his most inhumane. He's going to need the bottom feeders of this republic to carry out all of his fascist dictatorial edicts. Yeah. And those are the people he's going to choose to carry them out. San Francisco, we have to take a stand against this. I'm ready to take the stand in 2024 against Trump. Yeah. Personally, I'm ready. Because there's no way in the world I want that element in charge. Yeah. And if we lose, we'll have to have contingency plans. If we lose, I'm not staying San Francisco. We'll have lost a democracy. That's the end of it. I'm not sticking around for that element to run this republic. No. Because I know exactly what it is and what it'll do. You know, there's an old saying. If somebody shows you who they are, and they show you that they're not a scrupulous, well-meaning individual, you can do one of two things. Either choose to believe them or not believe them. We can choose to naively believe that somehow Donald Trump's second term would be something, you know, that unites our republic. We can choose to believe that. But there was no evidence of that in the first. In fact, there was a litany, a plethora of evidence to contradict just that. The division, the chaos, the violence, it started with him. It follows him. He feeds off of it. Yeah. And there's a certain type of sickness that's always been here. And now he's utilizing that sickness. Yeah. Against the rest of us who don't want it. Yeah. That's the way I see it. The government, through the courts, will settle whether a president should be allowed to attack his own nation in violation of the oath that he swore to defend and protect. The government will have to prove that case beyond a shadow of the doubt. We, the people, get to, make our choice. Yeah. We get a determination as to who we want to be our leader. We all know the type of individual Donald Trump is and the type of folks that follow him. Yeah. We'll either choose that or we'll choose the alternative. My mind is settled, just like it was in 2020. It was fire Trump in 2020, and it's fire Trump again in 2024. Period. He can't be allowed to go near 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue again. If he does, that's the end of everything that we really know in this country. Yeah. That's the end. It's a pretty serious choice to put in Maui. Yeah, it really is. Think back to where you were on January 6th. Think back to what you were thinking on January 6th. Did you want the insurrectionists to prevail? Did you want them to seize duly elected officials? Regardless of whether you agree with their policies, did you want those folks, QAnon shaman, and all of those folks who were screaming inside the Capitol, did you want them to be running your country? Because if Trump gets elected, they most certainly will. They'll be emboldened. Yeah. And let me tell you something. If they're running this country, they'll make January 6th look like a cakewalk. Yeah. We won't go backwards 7 years. We'll go backwards 3, 4, 5, 6 centuries. Yeah. I think the Atlantic said that, it'll be the dark ages all over the world. Yeah. I don't think people realize that what that signifies. It's not just the end of America now. Because all of us are going to have to make choices. Yeah. It's imperative we prevent it, yeah. It's imperative. And for all the folks saying that, Trump and President Biden are the same, that's like saying a squirrel and an alligator are the same. You look at our current president, his tone and his tenor as a leader is nowhere near resembling Donald Trump's. You can agree with a policy or disagree. The most impactful reason I'm choosing to re-elect Biden and Harris is because of the tone and tenor that they replaced from the previous administration. Yeah. That's the most paramount and central issue, in my opinion, in 2024. What type of leadership do we want for this country? That's it.